good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our Sage 100 Tips and Tricks webinar. This is Pam Scott. I'm the Director of Client Services with Oasis, and I will be hosting the webinar today. During the presentation, everyone will be muted. However, you will have the opportunity to ask questions, and there is a question where you can raise your hand and ask questions and type those in, and I will get to as many of those as I can during the presentation. If there are answers that require a little more detail or further investigation, I will follow up with you after the webinar and provide you with that information. So whether it's during the presentation or following, all of your questions will be answered. And normally I have a facilitator that kind of helps monitor those questions, but she is not available today. She's working with a client doing a demo. So just bear with me as I get to those questions, and we will go ahead and get started. So today we're going to talk about backing up your Sage software, and also we're going to talk about antivirus software and possibly some issues that it can cause and how to work around those issues, but also why it's very important to do your backups as well. So part of this is going to be a PowerPoint presentation, and then when we get to a certain area, I'll go into Sage and show you where some critical paths are set related to your backups. So and again, I'm not going to just read every single bullet point to you, but the reason that we talk about backups, and we think it's important enough to have a webinar dedicated to backups, is that when we're talking with clients about upgrades or how they back up their system, many times when you ask a client if they get good backups, the answer is either, well, we're supposed to be getting good backups, or I hope we do, or no, I know we need to work on that, but we really don't get good backups of our system. And you need to think about what would happen should there be a fire, a flood, your business is broken into and your server is stolen, your server crashes and there's no backup. You know, how much time and effort is it going to take to try to rebuild your accounting history or your business history? I mean, that can be very devastating. So we're going to talk about first is the files to back up. So within Sage 100, and for those of you that have been on the product for a long time, you know that it used to be called MAS 90 or MAS 200. Within the actual path when you're installing Sage, it still references MAS 90. So you want to make sure that you are backing up at least all of the files and folder that are at the MAS 90 folder level and below. This is going to make sure that it gets all of your system files as well as all of your data files. And again, this should be backed up on a regular basis, and you should include all of the company and system files and program files, not pick and choose what you want to back up. You know, if you're saying, well, I just back up the data files because we can just reinstall the software, that technically is true. But if you're having to do a full restore, it's going to be much easier and save a lot of time if you have a backup of everything. Also, we do not recommend that you do incremental backups. An incremental backup basically is just backing up, if you're doing them nightly, it's only backing up the data that changed that particular day. And in most situations when there is an issue where you have to do a restore, you are not just picking one or two files to back up. You're needing to back up, you know, your entire purchase order data, you're needing to back up your entire company ABC data, or everything in general. So please do not do incremental backups. They are not recommended, and if you choose that method and have a major catastrophe, you may be running into issues in being able to get a full working restore of your Sage 100. We recommend that you do nightly backups. If you are a very small business and you're only really in processing 1 day a week, then you would only need to do 1 backup during that week. But if you're a larger organization and you're doing transactions every day, if you do a nightly backup, if you have to restore, chances are, depending on the time of the failure, that you're only having to possibly re-enter a few hours or a day's worth of data versus the backup is good from last Tuesday and I have to recreate every entry that I've made since last Tuesday. And then also do not assume that your backup system is working. I cannot tell you the number of times that we have had clients call that have an issue, maybe where they have malware or they've been hit by the ransomware virus, and they assume that they have a good backup. And then when we start working with them to do a restore, they realize that they do not have a good backup, or that maybe their last good backup was from 6 months ago. So again, you can see how devastating that would be. And we already have enough issues in 2020, so we certainly don't want to add something like that to the mix. In addition to backing up the Mass 90 folder, there may be areas in Sage where you have set up to store documents outside of that Mass 90 folder. An example of that would be paperless Office, where you're storing those PDFs. A good example may be you may have all of your PDFs being stored under the Mass 90 folder, but let's say you do payroll, or let's say that you pay commissions, something of that nature, and you want that information to be more confidential. You may store those PDFs in a different location that are harder to access. And ACH files. If you're doing payroll direct deposit and creating those ACH files within Sage, if you're doing accounts payable ACH, you're setting up the path of where those files are stored. Again, those payroll ACH files, that's very confidential salary information, so you may want those stored somewhere else. And you want to make sure that you're backing up everything that you may need in addition to that. So I'm going to just switch to Sage real quick here and show you a couple of areas where this information would be stored. So one of the things that you can do in Sage 100 Standard or Advanced, it's not applicable for the premium version, which is the SQL version. In your company maintenance, and I'm just going to grab a company here, under the Preferences tab, you have your data location. And it says this is where I'm storing my Sage 100 data, and this is where I'm storing my payroll data. Now, this is a default because I have not made any changes to this, but if I wanted to store my payroll data to a different location, I can actually change the path and use what is considered an alternate directory. So you want to make sure that if you're using alternate directories that you want to get that information backed up as well. Another area is within paperless Office. When you go in and you're setting up paperless Office, in each area of, let's say, your journals and register maintenance, when you go in to set this up, you're listing the directory where you want those PDFs stored. So it could be different on a company by company basis. It could be different based upon whether it's your journal and register maintenance versus your period end maintenance versus report. So if you're using paperless and you're unsure of where that information is stored, you can go into the journal and register maintenance and then just click your printer icon. And we're going to preview this. Whoops, there's nothing selected. I'm getting a little bit of an error. But what it will do is it will provide you with an entire list of where all of those documents are being stored. And I see a question. Oh, all right, someone just said that you're still seeing the Oasis slide and not Sage. You should be seeing Sage. So let me make a change here. You should be seeing everything, so bear with me just one moment. I apologize for that. Okay, so can someone please answer and let me know if they are now able to see the Sage screen? Okay, so everyone is able to see that now? Okay, I do apologize for that. I thought I was sharing everything, but apparently I wasn't. So let me go back and just show you that very quickly, what I was talking about, the alternate directories. That is under Library Master, Main, Company Maintenance. And like I said, I'm just going to grab a company code. It's under the Preferences tab. And these are the locations where you can set up if you want to use alternate directories. It's going to automatically default to wherever your MAS90 folder is located on your server, but you can make changes to that. So that was company maintenance, and then I was talking about paperless office, and I was saying if you're using paperless, if you go into each of your maintenance records for journals and register, period end, report, and form maintenance. I'm going to pull up journals and registers. And you'll notice that you can have, we don't have anything set up for this company. So let me just do one real quick. And we'll just say all modules, all documents. Again, you can pick and choose if you want certain documents to go certain places. Again, I'm just doing it all for the company, but you can, as you could see from the setup, you can really drill down to that. And then you can set up where that PDF is going to be stored. So again, maybe if it's payroll related, you may choose to keep your payroll journals and registers on your local drive versus on a server where someone may be able to browse out and get that information. But that is part of the setup with paperless office. So that is another setup. And then just very briefly, I wanted to show you, for instance, in accounts payable, if you're using the ACH feature, if you go under setup and go to your AP options, you have the ACH tab. And then this is where you are saving your ACH documents as well. So that, and then you have basically the same functionality if you're doing direct deposit with payroll. So those are areas that if you're saving anything other than under your MAS90 folder, you're going to want to make sure those are being backed up as well. So just checking, okay, we don't have any more questions about that. So I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. And what I'd like for you, if somebody can just chime in and make sure that they are seeing the PowerPoint presentation, I would greatly appreciate it. We're on the alternate directories folder. So someone can just answer that question. Whoops. Okay, not seeing anyone answering right at the moment. I'm going to assume that everyone can see it. If you can't, please chime in. Oh, okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for answering that question. I appreciate it. So Again, we wanted to talk about that, and just to make sure that you're backing up all of the applicable directories. Now, I want to add something that for those of you that are payroll clients, most of you that use payroll have historical companies set up in your payroll, and you know that when we have upgraded you to the version to Payroll 2.0 in the new business framework, that we are not converting those historical companies, and you're keeping your current Sage out there for historical purposes in case you have to go back and pull any information. You know, somebody loses their W-2 from 2019 or something of that nature. So you want to make sure that you're also getting a good backup of your old Sage folder in addition to your new Sage folder. And with that being said, if you're not using payroll, or if you are, when we do an upgrade, the path of your Mass 90 folder is going to change. So you need to make sure that you're setting your backup to the new location, or that you're sharing that information with your IT professional. When we do an upgrade, when we finish the upgrade, each consultant should be giving you a document that basically outlines what was done and what the new path is, so that you know what to back up. But that's also very critical to remember. Okay. And this is what I was just talking about, making sure that you're backing up your old Sage. If you have historical companies and you want to make sure that you have access to that, if it is on the same server. Okay, so the first line of defense is a strategy for restoration. So you need to work with your IT support and establish a really sound recovery plan. You know, it's better to have that recovery plan in place so that if there is an issue, you know exactly what you're doing, who's doing what, who to contact. You know, I would even suggest having a full policy and procedure in place, you know, should you have a failure, and not just in restoring your Sage 100, but there are probably other things on your server that you're going to need to be restoring as well. So have that all lined out so that you don't get in a situation and you're trying to figure out who does what during that critical time. We suggest that you have a rolling 7-day of full backups. It is important that everybody be logged out of Sage because if people are working in Sage when you're doing a backup, they could have files locked, and then those files will not back up. Also, we talked about Mass 90 folder paperless. If you're using products such as BizNet, Sage Fixed Assets, Sage CRM, Sage HRMS, any other product that may or may not even integrate with your Sage, you're going to want to make sure you're backing those up as well. So there are many different backup options, and it really depends most likely on the size of your business, how much data you're trying to back up, and what works best for you. For a smaller business that doesn't have a tremendous amount of data, you know, you can manually do a backup, either using a jump drive. You could back up to a CD, DVD, Blu-ray. Again, you can do that manually, but you're going to want to make sure that, again, you know, if you're doing it on a CD, if you're doing a rolling 7-day backup, or at least a 5-day backup, Monday through Friday, you're going to want to make sure that you have a CD for each specific day, because if you find out you need to restore from Wednesday and that CD somehow is bad, then you can move directly back to the Tuesday CD and you're only losing one more day of data. Doing it manually can be a little time consuming, but it certainly is an option. You can clone a hard drive You can have an external hard drive. You can have a remote hard drive. What I would suggest is that, if you have a clone hard drive where everything you're entering is basically writing to another drive, if you have some type of a catastrophe at your physical location, a fire, flood, or something of that nature, excuse me, you may very well lose the clone hard drive as well to that situation. So it's really, the best case scenario is that whatever backup system you use is that those backups are stored off-site. They're either physically taken off-site or you're backing up to the cloud. There are several online storage services. One that came to mind is called OneDrive. That's what we currently use at Oasis, not to back up our server. We have another system that backs up our server, but we use OneDrive to back up our personal workstations. We use Office 365, and with our particular subscription plan with Office 365, each user gets 1 terabyte of space. So we actually set up our backup through OneDrive, and then it backs up to the cloud. So that is an option. You can also have cloud backup services. Probably one of the most known, or you hear advertised a lot, is Carbonite. But there are many more options out there for cloud backup services. So if you're interested in that, I would just do some research. You may get with your IT professional and see what they recommend, but that is also an option. And then also actually having your server hosted. So that means your server is not physically at your location, but someone is hosting that server. And most hosting services actually provide, they do the backups, they do the rolling backups, and they have a lot of redundancy in place so that if there is a failure, they can get you back up and running very quickly. So these are just some options I wanted to share with you. Do your own research, determine what works best for your business, but not having a backup strategy should not be an option on your list. So we talked a little bit earlier about making no assumptions that your backup is actually viable. I said we recommended putting together a plan, and part of that policy and procedure, part of that plan is that you should actually test the plan that you have. Put that plan into place and make sure that you can actually recover your data, that your backup files are actually usable, that you can do a full restore, and actually go through that whole disaster scenario and make sure that, even though it looks good on paper, even though, Sally and IT says, yes, we get good backups, make sure that you actually can restore and test that plan. Again, I can't share with you the number of times where when a client has an issue and they need to restore, honestly, I'll bet that less than 50% of the time, clients are able to do a restore. They discover that, the person that was always responsible for their backups left the company 2 years ago. They just assumed the new person was doing it, but no one ever shared that with the new person. I've had clients where their outsourced IT was responsible, and they found out that even though they were doing backups, the backup was not good, and they were unable to restore. So I'm not trying to scare you, but we have run into all of these scenarios. So talking about hosting your Sage 100, and this says Sage 100, and now the product is called Sage 100 Cloud. Just to kind of reiterate, Sage 100 Cloud is not a true cloud product. It is still installed on-premise on a server. it's more of a cloud hybrid, where there are components that that use the cloud, or there are third-party add-ons that you can add to your Sage that are cloud-based. Some of the generic cloud functionality that you would use in current versions of Sage would be if you print 1099s or W-2 forms and you're using Atrix. Atrix is cloud-based. If you're on the new Payroll 2.0, the new tax table engine is cloud-based. So there are components, but the entire package itself is still an on-premise package. So if you are realizing that, you really want to make sure that, someone is watching your server, maybe you don't have anybody internally and you don't have an external IT group that you work with, then you may want to consider hosting your Sage. So Oasis is partnered with a company called Trap Technology, and they do hosting of a variety of things, including Sage 100. Now, if you decide to host your server, hosting companies can host much more than Sage. So basically anything or software that you're running, they should be able to host that for you so that you don't have an in-house server for part of your software and then just hosting Sage 100. They can do as little or as much as you're interested in. So if you do have an interest in hosting your technology, you please get in touch with Jody Patterson, and here is her contact information, and she will be glad to provide you with additional information as well as pricing on hosting. So some of the things that are of a benefit of hosting is the data security. They have fire, flood, and theft protection. They do 7-day rolling backups. They do data encryption. They have a very well-defined disaster recovery. So, in the long run, they're going to get you back up and running probably much quicker than you're going to be able to do. So again, just kind of throwing that out there as an idea, as a possible option. So we've talked about and covered the backup portion of the presentation. I'd like to open it up and see if anyone has any additional questions about backups before I move to the next section. Okay, I see that some folks have raised their hand. If you can actually, if you have a question, if you would please type it in the Q&A area. Since we're all muted, I don't have the ability to call on you or unmute your line. So feel free to type in those questions if you want to. And we're going to go ahead and move to the antivirus section. I will tell you that if you have questions after the presentation, feel free to email me at pam@oasisky.com, and I will be glad to address those questions after the session. So talking about antivirus, we all know how important it is to have a good antivirus software, and but it can cause issues with your Sage 100, and it can cause issues such as you may get errors like that there's a file locking error. You may have performance issues. Your Sage 100 has just gotten slow, or you can't figure out why it's so slow. An antivirus could very well be the cause of that. I did have a question, so I'm going to go back and look at that very quickly. The question is there a backup functionality within Sage 100 Cloud itself? And the answer to that is no. there is not a built-in backup system to Sage 100 or Sage 100 Cloud. I don't know if that's something that they're looking at in the future with future releases, but it is not currently a functionality within the system. So again, antivirus, can't live without it. You need it, but you just need to be aware that it can cause issues. So, okay, we have another question. So I guess it's saying just back up those directories that you mentioned on the slide. Yes, it would be anything within the MAS 90 folder and below, and any other alternate directories that you may have. And just kind of, and you need to think about, because people may do things uniquely. You know, if you write custom crystal reports and you choose not to save them within your MAS 90 folder, I find a lot of clients will write reports and they just save them to their C drive. You know, if you're not backing up your personal computer, then those reports would be gone should your laptop crash. But yes, and if anybody wants a list of those files, or everybody that's attending today or that registered will be receiving a link to the recording of this presentation so that you can go through and have all of that information. So everybody will receive that. So I think that addressed all of the questions at this point. So again, antivirus, it's good, but you may find that it causes some issues. So when you call into, if you call into our help desk and say, you know what, Sage just started running really slow, then one of the first things we're going to probably talk to you about is, have there been any changes? You know, do you have new antivirus software? And take a look there. So if you're running into a lock file, system slow, sometimes you'll get error zeros that a file is busy. So you're actually trying to access a file, but your antivirus is scanning it, so it thinks that file is busy. You may consider temporarily disabling your antivirus to see if that resolves the problem. Now, the thing that you want to remember is typically most people have antivirus running on their server, and they have antivirus running on their workstations. So when you're disabling this, you need to do it at the workstation level as well as the server level to do your testing. We are not going to recommend that you permanently disable it, but temporarily we do that to rule out the issue as AV, you know, or if it's something else. What we do recommend is that you exclude certain Sage files from being scanned by your antivirus. And most antivirus software will allow you to put in exclusions. There are some that will not. If we run into that issue, then we'll kind of have to address any possible workarounds. But most of them will allow you to put in exclusions. So some of the things that we would recommend is to disable any aggressive or continuous monitoring of Sage 100. Some of those are known as on access, constant, real-time, or network scanning. And if it is constantly scanning these programs, you know, it may even keep you from being able to do workstation setups. It may keep you from being able to launch your Sage 100. You're trying to launch it, and then it's trying to scan it, and then you're going to get an error message, or it's just going to spin. It's also good to, you can exclude your entire MAS 90 folder. But you can also, whoops, I was trying to move down here just a little bit. Sage recommends excluding these file extensions. And again, we can provide those to you if you want. These are file extensions used by Sage 100. And we typically find if we exclude these file extensions from the scanning, that will resolve any issues with the error messages or the latency that you may be having. And also, especially with Sage 100cloud, you do need to make sure that this is listed within your antivirus software as a trusted site, which is spa.na.com. This information is can be found on the supported platform matrix that Sage releases for each version. It can also be found within their knowledge base. And again, you're going to get a copy of this as well. So I took this information directly from the Sage knowledge base because I knew it was the most up-to-date, but it should reflect the same information on the supported platform matrix. So this is just kind of pulling some other information, which actually I thought I had removed that slide, but apparently I didn't. You'll notice that it talks about some files to exclude. That's on the older versions of Sage. This is now the complete list. So we're just going to bypass this next slide. So that basically kind of gets us through the presentation and talking about backups and antivirus. What I'd like to know is if any of you have additional questions, please let me know. If you're running into, if you think, well, you know what, our Sage has just been running slow for, a few weeks or a few months, share this information with your IT professional or feel free to call into our help desk and they'll be glad to help you work through some of these issues. So I'm going to open it up one last time to see if there are any additional questions. And like I said, if you think of anything after the presentation, please feel free to email me at pam@oasisky.com. Again, each attendee, or even if someone in your organization also registered but they were not able to attend, they will get a follow-up email within the next couple of days, and it will have the link to this recording. And this recording will also be uploaded to our website for future reference. So I'm going to leave it open for one more minute to see if there are any additional questions. And if there are no additional questions, we will go ahead and end the presentation for today. The next webinar is going to be on October 21st. We're going to be talking about inventory management, and we're going to focus on preparing for year-end with inventory, physical counts, and so forth. So I hope you can join us for that webinar. I'll check one more time, and I don't see any more questions. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today, and appreciate you taking out the time, and just let us know how we can help. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye-bye.